What is up, guys? Welcome to Truth and Transparency. We're going to jump right into it. In order for me to explain this episode to its fullest, I am pointing to what you guys are looking at here is the transcripts from when Ann Taylor called Brett Payne to the stand. And the date is the testimony from January 23rd, 2025. So not the 2024. This is the 2025, January 23rd, 2025. So they swear Payne in, and Ann Taylor, I'll make it as big as I can. This is so sick. All right, so in the course of your responsibilities with Moscow Police Department, were you handling an investigation involving homicides at 1122 King Road? Answer from Payne, yes, ma'am. What was your role? I was assigned lead detective after about the first 24 hours in that case. And Ann said, and does that mean that you have responsibilities for the case and evidence? Yes, ma'am. Okay, she says, as such, did you participate in a search for a suspect? Yes, I did. Question. And when was the first time you had heard Bryan Kohlberger's name? Answer. The first time I heard Bryan Kohlberger's name was December 19th, 2022. Question by Ann Taylor. And what was that a result of? Answer. That was a result of investigative genetic genealogy that was being undertaken by the FBI. We had a phone call that evening, and we were told Bryan Kohlberger's name. So right here, I just want everybody to know that right there, Ann Taylor just pinned Brett Payne to being able to only ever say that without being impeached under oath. That's how the first time he had ever heard the name Bryan Kohlberger was December 19th, 2022. And what was that a result of? Investigative genetic genealogy. And I said to myself right there, wow, okay, well, how will they ever be able to tell the jury, or anybody for that matter, that they received a tip that had to do with Bryan Kohlberger if it did not have to do with investigative genetic genealogy? Okay. Next. That was a result, like I said, of investigative genetic genealogy. Her question was, and before that, Mr. Kohlberger was not on your radar? Answer. No, ma'am. Question. Before December 19th, was the FBI CAS team member located or co-located at and with you? Yes, ma'am. Question. How long had he been co-located with you? I don't remember exactly, but it had been several weeks at that point. And that was Nicholas Balance? Yes, ma'am. And what other FBI members were there? Now I know why Ann Taylor was asking this. Goodness, says Payne, a lot. We had technical assistant Maria, S.A. Jacobson, and numerous other FBI special agents that were there to assist. By the time it was December 19th, she says, and you first heard of Bryan Kohlberger's name, had you reviewed videotapes? Answer, yes, ma'am. Question, how many hours of videotape do you think you've reviewed up to that point? I don't remember a lot. I can't give you an accurate representation. Question, in those videotapes, did you focus in on any particular ones that were of interest to you? Answer, yes, ma'am. In particular, would be the, are you talking about addresses that were, how would you like me to refer to them? Question, how you nicknamed the cameras? Answer, okay, so the first one was from 1112 King Road. It was a surveillance camera, and an exterior surveillance camera on a house that was immediately to the northeast of 1122 King Road. There was some footage from a Linda Lane camera. I forget the name off the top of my head. There was footage from the A&W, which is at the corner of Lauder and South Main. There was footage from an address on Indian Hills. There was also footage from a Ridge Road camera. And that's how we refer to them, was basically by those names. Ann Taylor says, question, with those references in mind and keeping December 19th in mind, which of those cameras were your focus before you learned of Bryan Kohberger's name? Welcome to Truth and Transparency. Oh my motherfucking God. Okay? Everybody shots. Ann Taylor sticks it to him. We had no idea back then what this meant, but I'm going to tell you what it means now. Ann Taylor specifically says, with those references in mind, the names that you just told me of those cameras, and keeping December 19th in mind, which of those cameras were your focus before you learned of Bryan Kohberger's name? Well, I would say all of them were of importance before then. Well, here we go. Brett Payne's 12/13/2022 written report. That's when he wrote it up. But on 11/15/2022, I met back up with Officer House and Detective Powell a short time later, and they told me that they believe the spots of the dried fluid on the door displayed similar characteristics to that of dried blood. Namely, Detective Powell said the spots displayed a crackling texture common when blood dries on a surface. Like the spots, like they always display a similar drop pattern. And those drop patterns, they were similar to the blood spots found on the banister wall, and the wall on the stairwell to the ground floor, which I observed inside 1122 King Road. Wait, where was Payne? Oh, he was at the apartment in the outside of Jack Showalter. Okay, now keep that in mind. Then keep in mind now, remember the report that Danny Vargas wrote up, and she said, Payne, you got to come see this. And here it is at 3:50 on Linda Lane. They see a guy or a figure coming, right? Right. Oh, shit, Lana. Right. Okay, so going back to this. Again, Ann Taylor says, what were you interested in? What were you interested in? Well, I would just say all of them. Question. And it was later that other cameras became important. Is that right? Those were the main ones we relied upon for vehicles in particular. Is that those ones were? I'm going to return to that in just a minute, but I'm going to talk to you about interviews. Did you interview any people in relation to the case before December 19th? Yes, ma'am. And did other officers interview people? Yes, ma'am. Were some of those people the roommates of the people at 1122 King? Yes, ma'am. Did you review other officers' work as well? Yes, ma'am. Did you have regular meetings with other officers about the status of the investigation? Yes, ma'am. Did you have any role in deciding to pursue investigative genetic genealogy? Yes, ma'am. It was a collaborative decision amongst the command team to go that route. But yes, I was part of that. Were you part of the discussions during the process of the identification? Yes, ma'am. Were you aware that Othram Laboratories began the work on the investigative genetic genealogy? Oh, yes, ma'am. What kind of information did you receive from Othram Laboratories? I don't remember what was received from Othram directly. I knew they were conducting their specific type of work. I don't remember exactly what they provided. Did you receive some documentation from them? Oh, yes, ma'am, I did. Oh, okay. Do you know how many documents you received from them? Ann Taylor's over here. She knows how many documents she's received. So can you just give me an estimate? Like, just give me a ballpark figure here. I do not know. I don't. I do not. Question. Was it a one-time or more than one-time deal? I just don't remember that. Were you part of the discussion to take the work from Othram and go to the FBI? Oh, yes, ma'am. Why was that decision made? From my understanding. What do you mean from your understanding? I thought you were part of the decision. If you're part of the decision, that means like it's like, hey, Lana, this free agent's available. Should we purchase a free agent? I'm part of the decision to purchase the free agent, right? Answer. From my understanding, granted, this is my first encounter with investigative genetic genealogy. That's not the question. That's not the question. If you're involved in a decision, then you know what the discussion is about in terms of why you made that decision. It doesn't have anything to do with your knowledge of what investigative genetic genealogy is. It's your knowledge of the conversations as to why you would decide to do X, Y, or Z. From my understanding, granted, this is my first encounter with an investigative genetic genealogy. So again, as a collaborative discussion, we decided that because the Idaho State Police Lab in Othram had essentially exhausted their resources. So this is a call out. I would love to ask David and Kristen. I've heard nothing but great things about you from multiple sources who I respect to the utmost. And so right there, I have a question right there. Exhausted their resources. Payne is saying that you guys exhausted your resources, but you guys are like the it. So my first question to Othram is Payne confused here? Next. Well, Othram had essentially exhausted their resources. This is how I understood it. That we would move to the FBI because they had more resources available to pursue this particular avenue. Now, I was told, actually I read it, that in 2022, September 2022, Othram had a contract with the FBI for $475,000 from September of 2022 to last until September 2027. And that when the FBI had emergency cases, that they could come to you and use, is it DNA Solves? A database? Question. Continuing on. So like the FBI had a contract with Othram at the same time that the Idaho State Police had their contract with Othram as their third party lab. And so my question just simply is did Othram cease completely with this case, or were they just, and did they become the FBI's lab? Moving on. Do you know what more resources the FBI had? The only thing I'm privy to was that they had more databases that they could compare the sample to. That was the extent of my knowledge. Do you have familiarity with the databases and the rules that apply to those? Answer: no, ma'am. I'll save those questions. What was your communications with the FBI about the IGG? Answer from Payne: so our communications were just via telephone. I thought you were co-located with them. Telephone. I would just think that you would just talk to them. The sample was sent to the FBI. Look at this. So our communication were just via telephone. The sample was sent to the FBI. My question is, how? I don't remember the date it was given over to them, but after that, there was very few conversations, and if they happened at all, they were just telephonic, advising us that the process was still in the works, and they would let us know when or if they had anything of interest for us. And laying the groundwork there, laying pipe, and straight laying pipe. There's a reason that I'm reading this, because otherwise you'd be confused if I just jumped into the point. Okay. Now. Question by Ann Taylor to Officer Payne. Do you know what files or documents went to the FBI from Othram? I do not remember. Did you receive documents from the FBI in relation to IGG? Payne responds with that, and then Ann Taylor says, yeah, in regards to IGG. Payne says, I believe after the fact, after we received Kohlberger's name, we did receive documents, but I don't remember what they were. We've read 314 pages of reports from the Moscow Police Department, all of which are over 500 in total, like length, when you add up all 1,314 reports. I've gone over 314 reports, like with a pubic comb. And I said pubic, yeah. Pubic, wig, merkins, fine. Have you guys heard me talk about that yet? I didn't think so. Question. Do you know how many documents related to IGG you received from the FBI? No, ma'am. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. I believe as part of discovery, it was in the thousands of pages, but that's the best. That's the best of my knowledge. Thank you for that. The thousands of pages, you guys. You guys heard that, thousands of pages. Well, I told you that there was 314 Moscow Police Department reports, totaling right around 500 and some. Okay, thousands of pages that he said he received, which would mean he would have to put them in a report. Okay. Ann Taylor's getting some answers. Nobody realized it, but Ann Taylor was. She was realizing it. All right. So thank you for that. When she says thank you for that, she's like, whew, thank you for that. I was waiting to hear those words that they're in discovery, right? Ready? All right. So once you have Mr. Kohlberger identified, What's your understanding of what that meant to have his name? She's trying to get him to say specifically what she needs him to say. Just in relation to the overall investigation, is that? Yes. Okay, Payne says. So the only thing that was given to us was Bryan Kohberger's name. That was it. It was conveyed to us by the FBI that it was to be taken as no more than a tip. That was it. So he knows that the FBI provided this, and then it came from investigative genealogy, right? Now watch this. He continues to say, so once we received his name, we set about doing basically an independent verification of whether or not he was involved in this crime. And says, I'm going to talk to you about that a little bit more, but do you know why the FBI connected Bryan Kohberger to the case? Right? Why? Do you know why? Answer. So, December 20th, if memory serves. Now think about Gary Jenkins. December 20th, right? So, December 20th, if memory serves, we had a secondary meeting with the FBI via Teams. So this would be like Google, it's like a Zoom via Teams. If memory serves, and they simply walked us through the family tree. Family tree, IGG, right? How they did that. Now, I don't remember the details of all of that. It was an in-depth conversation that, to be honest, is above my head. But they essentially worked their way through the whoops. There we go. They essentially worked their way through the family tree and arrived at a conclusion that Bryan Kohberger was a person we should look into as a tip. That's the extent of my knowledge of how they did that. Ann Taylor says, question. How was Bryan Kohberger, the name you received as a tip, linked to the case? Answer. He wasn't until after December 19th. Now, this is where it gets really good. For like the Lana's going to bring it all together with a bow. Yes, she is. Now, Ann Taylor says, question. What item of evidence did they link Bryan Kohberger to? How could you say I'm not sure what you're asking with that? How can you even stutter that out of your mouth? Or say it so fast? I'm not sure what you're asking. As far as before December 19th, is that what you're referring to? That's gaslighting. And that's getting a lawyer off their game. Let's see how Ann Taylor responds. Well, yeah, she says. We didn't have one at that point. Why did you become interested in learning the identity of Bryan Kohberger? This is another way she tries to say it. Again, he's saying, not quite sure I understand your question. We were interested in anyone who would have been involved in this. The DNA from the knife sheath was obviously the one thing. Finally, he says it. Woo-wee! She just linked the IGG to the knife sheath. See? He says it. Not sure I understand your question. We were interested in anyone who would have been involved in this. The DNA from the knife sheath was obviously the one thing we had that we thought was a very strong piece of evidence in this case. So it was that particular piece that we pursued as a potential avenue of identifying a suspect. How did you know that there was DNA? found on that, right? There's DNA in the house other than that, though, right? Oh. Question. Is it your understanding that the FBI's work said that it was Bryan Kohberger's DNA on the sheath? That is not my understanding. What? Question. What is your understanding? My understanding is that the FBI concluded that Bryan Kohberger was a possible source of DNA that we should look into. They did not, to my knowledge, at any point say Bryan Kohberger's DNA is on the knife sheath. That was never conveyed to me. What? Gary. Question. On December 20th, when that happened, when he's somebody you should look into, what did you do? We had already started looking into him from the previous evening, December 19th. So that day on December 20th, we began going through basically our sort of standard investigative procedures that we had been doing throughout the investigation for various leads, to include basic DMV searches, NCIC offline returns, NCIC searches. We have a database called TLO, which is a credit-based search we use to find, basic information. So we started doing all of those things, looking for information on Mr. Kohberger. I don't see Gary Jenkins in there yet. And what you found is that he didn't have a criminal history. Is that right? Correct. Talk to me about going to Pennsylvania. For the trash pull? Well, I was not in Pennsylvania for the trash pull. Oh, okay. I'll ask somebody else that later. Okay, all right. So after you received Bryan Kohberger's name, and he hasn't been on your radar at all before. Is that right? Correct. All right. So Judge Hippler is hearing this. He's hearing this from the lead detective, saying that he was not on your radar at all before what? The FBI comes with what? How can Hippler write an order up saying that these people were deemed credible witnesses? He's telling you they never heard of his name before the IGG. What is Hippler talking about then when he wants to say that? Because the whole purpose in January here, 23rd, 2025, was for all this suppression hearings. Okay? All right. You had pursued interviews and surveillance video. Had you pursued evidence found inside the scene at 1122 King Road? Yes, ma'am. What efforts did you make to pursue unknown? Now, here's your Lana. I know that you got to be getting close. Yep. 30 minutes in. Here it is. From all the MPD reports, now you go back to this and watch. What efforts did you make to pursue unknown male B? And Payne says, you have to be more specific. I don't remember exactly where unknown male B came from. She says, if I told you the lab report showed unknown male B came from a blood spot on the handrail going between the second and the first floor, does that help jog your memory? Oh, yeah, it does. Jack Showalter, yeah, it does. Okay. This is now, we bring in this report. Okay. Which is the first, look at, on 11/15. Based off of this information, Officer House and I responded to 500 Queen Road at approximately 10 o'clock. We walked on the common walkway in front of the door to Showalter's apartment and observed the exterior of the door. The area around the door had numerous spots of dried fluid, which appeared to be rust drops from a metal roof above the apartment's door. These drops were mainly, we all know this, right? Then it goes on right here, and it says that I returned to the MPD and was notified by Detective Vargas, like just the same day, who was reviewing security camera footage provided by the owners of Linda Lane of possible footage of someone walking by the camera at 3:50. Are you kidding me? I watched the film with Detective Vargas. The cameras show the parking lot of Linda Lane, which is situated directly south of Queen Road, in his apartment. The frame captures a portion of the Queen Road parking lot in front of blank, but does not capture the apartments themselves. The area of 500 Queen Road and this apartment number is also much darker than the rest of the Linda Lane. The video is infrared and is thusly displayed in black and white. At approximately 3:50 hours on 11/13/2022, per the timestamp on the video, a figure clad in black clothing can be seen walking from the building which houses 500 Queen Road and that apartment. The figure walks to the west out of the parking lot and leaves the frame of the video as the figure enters the sidewalk area between the two other apartment buildings at 500 Queen Road. Blah, blah, blah. The figure is not captured, blah, blah, blah. Based off the information above, MPD and ISP officers serve a search warrant on the exterior of the front door to Queen Road. Access to the residence per this search warrant was granted only if the presumptive positive test for blood was found on the exterior door. But the main key parts here are that it matched the droppings. Right here, the spots displayed a similar drop pattern to the blood spots found on the banister and the wall on the stairwell to the ground. This then would lead to none other than miraculously a search warrant, a phone call supposedly made by Jack Showalter to say, hey, maintenance, I'm putting in a work order. Can you guys go check out my water quality control? Thanks. And then maintenance people would go in there. Then they were like, oh, we found all this blood. We're going to call police. Then the police, they're able to get into the apartment. Okay. So Ann Taylor says, unknown male B, let me help you out here. Well, if I told you that the lab report showed unknown male B came from a blood spot on the handrail going between the second and the first floor, does that help you? And he says, yes, ma'am. Okay. Why did you not pursue that person? At that point in time, we had already received Mr. Kohlberger's name. What? Excuse me? Why did you not pursue that person? Unknown male B, which is the handrail. At that point in time, we had already received Mr. Kohlberger's name. And from what my understanding was, entering another DNA profile into, this is all lies, into CODIS would remove the previous one we had from the knife sheath. Excuse me? This is why you got fired. or I should say, this is why he's no longer a cop, whatever you want to say. What are you talking about? What does this have to do with, you guys employed investigative genetic genealogy, right? So why wouldn't you employ investigative genetic genealogy on the blood that's on the rail? That's literally why you were going into Jack Showalter's apartment. But then the best part about it is that you said that you didn't pursue this. You didn't pursue this blood because you had Bryan Kohberger's name. Are you kidding me? Wait, what are we talking about here? Do you know that Ann Taylor must have been like, what the fuck are you talking about? And so I didn't, let's just see where this goes. Let's see where this goes. So Ann Taylor's gonna be like, what, excuse me? So if memory serves, the discussion was, we'll hold off. We'll stay with the one from the knife sheath if we need to. We can address the unknown male B at a later time. What are you talking about? Question. I want to make sure I understand your testimony. No wonder Ann Taylor was like, I want to make sure I understand your testimony. She knows these dates, okay? She knows these dates. On 11/15/2022 is when they are trying to get into Bryan, or trying to get into Jack Showalter's apartment because of the unknown male B, the blood, the way that it looks on the railing. They know that they took a swab from it, okay? And the question is when did it, I guess, get labeled as unknown male B? Like, but so you have the sheath that is unknown male A. This is B, but it has nothing to do with CODIS because IgG has nothing to do with CODIS, right? So why wouldn't you, hey, FBI, or hey, Othram, we got another one we want you to work on. Who are these people? Right? Hey, is this the same? Like, you would know that it's not the same. You had to have known that it was a different profile than the sheath. And at that time on 11/15, you didn't know if there was anything on the sheath because the sheath wasn't even handled yet. So Payne's over here, and Ann Taylor's like, okay, I want to make sure I understand your testimony. Were you not aware of unknown male B until after December 19th when you knew Bryan Kohberger's name? See how she's like, wait a second, what are you talking about? No, ma'am. I was aware of that before, yes. So then what the hell are you talking about right here? Then, like, what are you talking about? No, ma'am. I was aware of that before, yes. Okay. How about unknown male D? Ready? This one's for you, Chris McDonough. Again, you're going to have to be more specific about unknown male D. If I told you unknown male D came from a lab report from a sample of blood on some gloves outside the house, does that refresh your memory? Oh, yes, ma'am, it does. Oh, yes, ma'am, it does. You're aware of that too? You're aware of that too? Yes, ma'am. I want to back up and talk about the affidavits. I think you told me in a prior hearing that you were the person that wrote Exhibit A or the affidavit in support of like the search warrants when it came to looking for things about Bryan Kohberger. Oh, yes. Did I understand that right? Yes, ma'am. Okay. And the affidavit, when you began, was that on or about December 23rd to get records? As far as when I started writing the affidavit, is that what you're referring to? The first search warrant that applied to Bryan Kohberger, she says. I believe, yeah, it was December 23rd. Yes. So the first warrant that they ever wrote about Bryan Kohberger, here it is, December 23rd. Okay. So that would mean, okay. Remember, he says this is going to be a working document, right? And so if it was a working document and if it had to do with other people and I'm trying to get into so-and-so's apartment because there was a maintenance man who told me about some blood. And so therefore, like, I'm adding to it. He says he's adding to it. Well, where's the part where you, in the exhibit A, that you were adding to as it was a living and live working document? Where is it that you added about the blood outside of or inside of 500 Queen Road blank apartment? Where was that in your working live document? Did you remove that? So when did you begin writing that affidavit? I began writing that affidavit long before that. It had been a running affidavit because at the beginning of it, there's the walkthrough of the crime scene. There's numerous things. What do you see how he says, well, there's just numerous things. It was a living document. So we just add information to it. I'd say that document started, I don't know, I couldn't give you an exact date. A couple weeks prior to that, even before we knew Mr. Kohlberger's name. Well, no shit. But the stuff that you put in it to get the search warrants that were before it, did you just take those out? Right? Because in Idaho, you want to put things in that could potentially be exculpatory, right? Isn't that what Idaho's all about? I don't know. I'm just the researcher. I don't know. Help me understand what parts were added after you knew Mr. Kohlberger's name. I mean, Ann Taylor literally playing the long game, setting them all up. So help me understand what parts were added after you knew Mr. Kohlberger's name. Oh, well, to walk down the line best I can. So obviously there's the initial component, which is the crime scene, the testimony from the roommates. Then after that, it shifts to, I believe, now I know why she didn't. I always wondered, why didn't she just hand him the affidavit and say, here, out of this affidavit, what was before Bryan? She was trying to trip him up. She was trying to trip him up to say something that came from the affidavit when it was being used for other things. So if you show him the one that, the one that we've all seen. So here, ready? He says, the traffic stop, I'm sorry. Mention of the first component was the Bryan Kohlberger was pulled over by Corporal Duke on a traffic stop. How's that relevant? He was also contacted by WSU police. Then he says his vehicle was ran by WSU PD officers. He was also contacted by WSU police. His vehicle was ran by WSU police officers. Then after that, we included trying to walk down through the things without it in front of me. Why should it be so difficult? He's like, God, I can't fuck this up, man. Come on. Let's see. Then we included the vehicle information that was about the white Elantra. And after that, we included his residence and that he had hit LPRs, or his vehicle had been seen on LPRs between Moscow or Pullman, and Pennsylvania. And then there was the component about where he lived in Pennsylvania. And it's like, let's go back to that time before you started adding the traffic stop. That affidavit contains some information that you gained from other officers. Is that right? Yes, ma'am. Okay. And you didn't write large parts of that affidavit. Is that also right? I took a lot of language from experts and other officers and agents. That's correct. Question. Are you aware your affidavit, your living document, was claimed by by other people as their own original document, not giving you credit, but claimed as their own work. Are you aware of that? She's talking about Blaker. She's talking about Maury Blaker. Answer. Yes, ma'am. We come from a school of plagiarism. Yes. Are you aware that you probably know because Nick Balance was co-located with you? Did the two of you continually work on language to satisfy what the prosecutor wanted to see for probable cause? The prosecutor wanted to see. Yes, ma'am. Just like the shows, Law and Order. Come on. You know, Benson, always, and what's her tits? Stabler and Benson. Yeah. And they're talking to the blonde, and she's like, yeah, you're going to have to give me more than that for probable cause, blah, 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 blah. Okay, great. Yes, ma'am. Did you and Nicholas Balance produce a map to show a possible route of travel for your suspect? Yes, ma'am. I personally believe that map was from the timing advanced. Taylor says, in your honor, I'm at defense exhibit 1A. I can either put this up here or approach, the court with the map. Can I see what you're referring to? There's been a lot of exhibit A's in this case. Look at this. Oh, I absolutely understand that, Your Honor. They were all put in so that counsel would be advised. The court says the fact that I admitted this group of documents does not mean that it is something that can be relied on absent you actually using it. Absolutely, I understand that, Your Honor. I don't expect the court to read my mind. Thank you for that. Fuck. Anne's like, yeah. Detective, I'm going to attempt to put this map up here. Is that the map you and Nicholas Balance came up with to help with probable cause? Yes, ma'am. She asked him about it in 2024 in May. And he was like looking at it and he's like, oh God, this is really tough to see and read. And then asked Maury, like, where'd you get these maps? And he's like, oh, I just made it. It was an open source. I just created like a PowerPoint, like, just like a Word document. And I just took the map and I placed it on there. And he just got it from like a Google map. No. Somebody knows something else, but needed him to say about that map. Okay. And she says again, whenever this happens, he says, yes, ma'am. Whenever she says, thank you, boom, daddy. That's Ann Taylor saying, thank you. Thank you. When's the other time that she said it? She said it one other time. She said it one other time so far. When was the other time? When it was just a big, oh my God. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to leave that there for just a minute. I'm going to ask you some other questions. I want to back up to the part of the first affidavit. This is asking for AT&T records. Is that right? So she's got him to say on the stand that they did not have Bryan Kohberger's name prior to IGG. IGG is nowhere in the living document. None. Her argument is that everything flows from IGG. There is none. This probable cause affidavit has everything that's here. You don't have any of it. And that's why she's saying, what did you have before you had the name Bryan Kohberger? Where were you? What would you say you had? And he said, well, the walkthrough of the scene, the interviews from the roommates, and this is AT&T record. Is that the first set 48 of AT&T records? And 48 is, yep, there's two AT&T warrants. One's 48 and one's the historical. So first is 48. And he says, yes, ma'am, I believe so. Question. And are these AT&T records related to a phone Mr. Kohlberger had? Yes, ma'am. All right. And so in doing this affidavit, you have this working document. And I'm going to start with DM. If I say DM, do you know who I'm talking about? Yes, ma'am. I do. And she is one of the roommates. Is that right? The court says, we're sealed. You can use the name. Taylor says, I can use the name. Trying to get a habit. Redacted. Who is she? Payne. She was one of the surviving roommates. Question. And how many times was Dylan interviewed by law enforcement at the time you wrote this December 23rd report? If memory serves, it was 4, I think 3 or 4. Question. In the affidavit, you wrote a statement. That she had heard Kaylee go upstairs, yell, in quotes, someone's here, and run back downstairs. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. And you used the words she thought she heard. Do you remember that? Jennings, objection. Jennings knew where this was headed. She's like, fuck, objection. Your Honor, I'm going to object. I'm objecting based on the scope of what this testimony is supposed to be. My understanding was it was limited solely to the issue of Franks and IGG. The court say, I was just about to ask the question. I don't recall the statements of Dylan being a subject of a motion to suppress separate from the Franks issue. Am I correct about that? Well, wait a second. Jennings just says, my understanding was it was limited solely to the issue of Franks and IGG. What does he just say? I don't recall the statement of Dylan being a subject of a motion to suppress separate from the Franks issue. What exactly? Oh my God. Exactly. This is the Franks. This is the Franks, right? Franks, IGG, right? This is what we're talking about. The only issue we are at a Franks hearing on is the IGG. Taylor says, all right, well, let me rephrase. Let me start from a different place. I'll sustain the objection. But they go hand in hand when everything flows from IGG. So I guess what I would have said if I was Taylor there is, Your Honor, he just answered, I don't know, probably 10 questions back. I thought he opened the door here when he said that they did not have Bryan Kohlberger's name anywhere until it was given to them from the FBI through investigative genealogy. I just asked him, do you want to ask your clerk here or your stenographer? Do they need to run back and so that you can read and hear the transcripts? He opened the door. That door is opened because how did you start this probable cause affidavit if you did not know? What are you doing? How did you just admitted that you only knew his name because of IGG? And that's what we're here for is IGG, right? Suppression. And the way that we're going to suppress though everything from it is because he just admitted on the stand that the name came from IGG, and that's nowhere in the probable cause. So all of this comes from what? Like we don't have to put everything that we know about somebody. What? Put everything. That's the only thing. So she just says, okay. Let's go back to the part of your affidavit for December 23rd, AT&T 1, the part where you put in things particular to Bryan Kohlberger. You put that affidavit in a traffic stop, I believe. From August in Moscow, Idaho. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. That traffic stop, was that on your radar before December 19th when you learned of Bryan Kohlberger's name? No, ma'am. The next thing you relied on was a traffic stop at WSU. Is that right? Yes, ma'am. Was that traffic stop on your radar before you knew of Bryan Kohberger's name on December 19th? No, ma'am. You put in information about front license plates being missing from Pennsylvania cars. Is that right? Yes, ma'am. The 1112 video did not show enough of the vehicle that you could see whether it had a front license plate. Is that right? That sounds correct. Yep. So it was after you learned of Bryan Kohberger's name that became part of your affidavit. Is that right? Yes, ma'am. Let's talk about the vehicle identification for a minute before I run back down through the rest of that affidavit after Bryan was identified. When you worked with Special Agent Engle to identify a vehicle, was there more than one vehicle he identified? I don't believe there was. What? Yes, there was. There was a chart of 7 different cars. There were 7 different cars. 7 different cars. I can't even believe this. I don't believe there was. If memory serves, it was just the Hyundai Elantra. Now that's a damn lie. If memory serves, huh? Miss Jennings says, oh, I'm sorry, the next one. Would you agree that he was most comfortable with the years 2011 to 2013? Miss Jennings, object, Your Honor. For the same reasons, I don't understand the scope related to IGG. Miss Taylor says, Your Honor, I'm going to ask for a little leeway on this one. I think it will be clear in about 2 more questions. It is a sealed proceeding. I'll be arguing it at Frank's. I don't want to pollute the record, so approach. Now, bench conference. Ms. Taylor says, they looked for a 2011 to 2013. It was their BOLO. It was after Bryan was immediately identified by IGG that they expanded the search. The court says, that relates to what? Ms. Taylor says, it's going to relate to Frank's, but it has to do with IGG and when they identified him. I have about 2 more questions along this line. The court says, you have the separate Frank's motion regarding the scope of the car search. Ms. Taylor says, absolutely. That we're not here for today. It's not what she's talking about, the car search. What the fuck? We're here for the IGG. I get the idea that if the IGG is suppressed, the warrants based on IGG is suppressed. What? That's what he thinks that we're like. That affects a lot of other things, right? But I don't think you need to get into the evidence of that at this point because it's part of the frame. There's a separate Frank's motion on that. She's like, there absolutely is. The next question I'm going to get to in the affidavit after the IGG was the police in Pullman running the car. Now does everybody see? Holy shit, Taylor. Oh my God. Because she's about to papow him on the fact that, ready? Payne, you put in your affidavit that you had a BOLO on 11/25, but really you didn't, did you? Your BOLO was on 11/28. And the people that found that you want to refer to is the WSU crew, right? Is that right? Because they've found the car and want to put their names next to it for the 29th so that it coincides with your fucking BOLO that you put out internally. But that's not what happened in Pullman, is it? On 11/25, love. And he has no idea that she knows about this. You know how I know that? Oh. Well, I should take that back. He might have an idea if he just has any brains, or he was just so far out of the loop that they excluded his ass, okay, because the FBI was doing whatever, so was Blaker, and whatever Pullman was doing, and blah, 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 blah. But he had to have shit bricks after the May 2024 debacle that him and Maury just shat the bed on, Ann Taylor then comes with, hey, I have a request, and I want your IM messages, I want your this, I want your that, I want your radio logs, and I want Love's spreadsheet. Love's spreadsheet says 1125. 1125. And what's interesting is that why are you referring? So not only did you not know Pullman found the car, but then you say and you testify that I had no idea that WSU found the car either. I just found that out afterwards. Now we get to talk about DNA and where everything came from. Now we get to talk about chain of custody. So he clearly, so when she says the next question I'm going to get to in the affidavit after the IGG was the police in Pullman running the car. And at first, when you read this, you can easily intertwine the two, thinking that WSU Pullman, but really it's a big, huge separate thing, because WSU's shit had nothing to do with Pullman and what Pullman and the FBI and Blaker were up to. Let's see here. The corporate detective Dustin Blaker. Collection of plates related to the Hyundai Elantra. From November 25th, 2022 to December 12th, 2022, I gathered information from other police agencies around Moscow in reference to any 2012 to 2013 Hyundai Elantras. Bullshit. 7/21/23 is when this motherfucker wrote this report up. Why is it such a secret what you were doing, Dustin Blaker? Oh my God. Oh, that was after the preliminary hearing was supposed to be scheduled, as well as after the indictment. Oh, just dirty dogs. Oh, Dustin Blaker was working with who? November 25th. So you're the one that sent everybody looking for that shit secretly, right? Is that right? 1125. Oh, now it makes sense. Hitler got played like a fiddle, baby. Hitler's like, look at his order now. How you like me now? Your order looks like pure badussy. Booty, dick, and pussy. Badussy, baby. Right there. 1125. Blaker. From November 25th to December 12th, I gathered information from other police agencies. Do you know what Payne said? He had no idea about that car until when? After. I did not even know WSU ran any queries. Once I gathered all of this information, I turned it over to the FBI. What? Did you didn't turn over to Payne? What do you mean once you gathered all this information? It was a live running. Oh, wait. Blaker, you filled out an application for a search warrant, right? Affidavit that you adopted and used to get into his apartment, to use to get into his work office space. Ann Taylor nutted these people. She says to Hitler, the next question I'm going to get to in the affidavit after the IGG was the police in Pullman running the car. And he has laid it out in the affidavit after the IGG without stating it. So I'm doing the IGG part with him now. that car is a different year than the one the bolo is for. That's as far as I'm going with the car at this hearing, meaning that your bolo that you sent out, what were you guys doing? Because I looked at this, and this is how I know it's all bullshit. I went back and I found something. Every single year out of every single car, minus Bryan Kohberger's, is a 2013. There is one 2015 and one 2016. Look at when this report was written up. Dustin Blaker, why would you write up a report on 7/21/2023 for you just simply doing that? There's no way that you were not providing Payne with this information. There's no way that you're saying that you did all this. Once I gathered all of this information, I turned it over to the FBI, who was tasked with gathering all plate information to build up a possible suspect pool for this case. Fucking lies, man. Fucking lies. Now it comes into question those reports. I told you the wrong dates on this type of stuff. Ready? Let's talk about that November 18th. Guess who took the sheath? Guess who transported all that shit? Blaker. On November 18th, I told you this could not have happened on November 18th. This report was written on November 28th, but on November 18th, these items were non-existent. The glove with the blood wasn't found until 11/24, unless there's a different glove that then you just, I don't know, made the same ticket for the one that you found on 11/24. The swab here that you took, then we have another piece of a DNA swab from on November 19th. Then on November 23rd, there's blood swab. Then on November 23rd, there's a different blood swab. But all of that stuff, that's when they were tagged. But the biggest thing that tells me that this was not done on November 18th is because some of these items were not even known to exist then. And how long it takes to get to Meridian and back alone is 11 hours. That's without stopping. That's without even dropping off your item. And so he couldn't have had a typo with saying that it was that, oh, I really did this on the 28th, not the 18th. I call bullshit on it all. This is now who your captain is, or I mean your chief. They had access. Okay. Swabs, anytime you take an item and you swab it, and then you are taking like whatever it's not the item, it's the swab of the item. So going back to this, then Taylor says, listen here, Hippler. The next question I'm going to get to in this affidavit after the IGG was the police in Pullman running the car. And he has laid it out in the affidavit after the IGG without stating it. Meaning, so I'm doing the IGG part with him now. That car is a different year than the one the bolo is for, because she saw the bolo. And this is why Gary Jenkins could shove it up his ass too. But you slipped up, Gary, so I thank you for it. When did the bolo go out? Did the bolo go out on the 28th? Did the bolo go out on the 25th? You think that Ann Taylor is also going to tell Hippler all of her little tricky poos? No, she's not. She's like, that's as far as I'm going with the car at this point, or at this hearing. Counsel, I don't understand what that has to do with the IGG, says Jennings. It's part of a Frank's hearing related to vehicle identification. I understand her timeline, I believe that she's about to say. I understand her timeline, but I think that point has already been made. Oh, has it? No, it hasn't. Do you understand that that this is prosecutorial misconduct right here? Do you understand that it hasn't been made? Oh, it's been made, but not like we were about to learn. And what we were about to learn is that how Ann Taylor was going to make it about no. WSU is not the same as Pullman. And WSU that you put in the PCA has absolutely nothing to do with Dick. But you've already admitted that you didn't even know that how you tried to make it sound like to the world is that that's how you identified Bryan Kohber, not through investigative genealogy, right? So any judge that was reading the probable cause in order to give you so they lied, okay? They lied about knowing him through WSU. Because Payne had to say, I had no idea about that. And do you want to know why the queries ended up coming up after the fact? Because those fucking idiots blabbed their mouths when they weren't supposed to. The people that were actually working with the FBI telling everybody to hush, hush. Psh, psh, psh. Yeah. Fuck all these people. But Ashley Jennings does not want this Pullman shit to come out. Ms. Taylor says, this was when I was allowed to explore this witness since he's already here and we've paid for him to come here. Court says, yeah, but I didn't open up everything to Frank's because we couldn't get into all the other things that I understood we could get into the entirety of Frank's on IGG, which is why I allowed it. And that's what we're going to stick to today. Right here, IGG flows. It makes everything. Well, I'm not suggesting we go into other Frank's issues that sprung in part from IGG because those are separate issues. There is nothing in part here. The man, and I don't, if I was Taylor, I'd be like, Your Honor, he just spoke and said nothing came there. Bryan Kohber was not known to anybody for any reason until after IGG. And he's trying to make it seem like IGG, okay, was December 19th. Bullshit. I don't even believe that. But Ann Taylor's over here like, let's keep it that way because what we're going to show is that they're lying. And here's this. Why would they ever be typing up white Elantras if the bolo didn't go out yet? Why would Pullman be looking for white Elantras if there was no internal bolo? Does everybody understand that? They didn't even know what type of car they were looking for yet on 11/25. It wasn't until 11/26 when you actually look at Immel's report is when he writes up that email and says, "Yeah, you know what? It's 2011, 2013," and he's like, maybe we can just go ahead and go 2011 to 2016." And then he's like, then he emails back. He says, no, you know what? I'm way more comfortable with the 2011, 2013. Do you want to know why that question was ever posed to him in the first place? Because Payne saw the fucking shit, in my opinion. Payne, these people are just sick. Like, this isn't how it's supposed to be. This isn't how it's supposed to be. For Hippler to even think and suggest that Bryan Kohber's identification came from anything other than what that man just testified to is disgusting. He just told you nothing came from, it was all from IGG. We did not use it. So you didn't use the lead, right? But without that lead, you would have never had, would you ever like even considered putting him? And so my question is, everybody's done an interview with people, and I've always said this: if IGG is such an amazing tool, which I believe that it is, why didn't you put it in your probable cause? everybody's doing interviews right now. Nye, talking about how great IgG is. Well, why didn't you put it in your, if it's so great and you can use it and why didn't you just put it in the probable cause? So instead, you just thought we would lie about how we got to Bryan Kohberger. And when people make that type of a decision, then they'll lie about anything. then that's when the integrity and the trust and the reliability and things just goes out the window. And that's what loses you cases at trial, because that's where you can't get over the reasonable doubt. Now everything's hanging on a thread with some touch DNA on an object that should have returned, oh, you got his name, and this car should be loaded with, trace and his apartment, digital stuff and blah, blah. Again, this does not mean that he is innocent. It just means that they lied. Well, Hippler says, well, I'm not suggesting we get into another Frank's issue that's sprung in part from IgG, because those are separate based, right? I mean, and so I think we just need to talk about the specific IgG stuff today in terms of a Frank's. There's not a separate motion to suppress based solely on that and not the IgG, if I'm not mistaken, apart from Frank's motion. Ms. Taylor says, to suppress which I'm not following. Who would follow this? It doesn't make any sense. Absolutely, Anne. I would have been like, what the fuck are you talking about, Hippler? Look at this. She's like, IgG flows. It makes everything. And then he cuts her off. Well, I'm not suggesting we get into other Frank's issues that sprung in part from IgG, because those are separate based, right? And so I think we need to just talk about the specific IgG stuff today in terms of a Frank's. There's not a separate motion to suppress based solely on that and not the IgG. If I'm not mistaken, if you go and you look at every single motion they put in to suppress, everything says that it stems from the IgG. And so she's like, I'm not following what you're talking. Yes, everything stems from the IgG, because you don't ever get to Bryan Kohberger without it. So how are you developing probable cause if you're not lying? That's her thing. You are lying in the document if you're saying you got to Bryan Kohberger any other way. Does Anne need to come out and just say that? Do you understand that that's our argument? Does everybody out there understand that? That document is not factual, because Payne just got on the stand and told the world that we did not have Bryan Kohberger's name until December 19th. And it came from IgG. So everything that why wouldn't you just say, hey, Payne, when you typed up this probable cause affidavit, were you trying to make it seem like to the magistrate that you got to Bryan Kohberger by a car? Because you just sat here and said on the stand that you got to him from investigative genetic genealogy, right? You never wrote in there that you got a tip, did you? No, I didn't. Okay, so didn't you try to make it seem like to the magistrate that you got to Bryan Kohberger because of a WSU inquiry, like inquiry for white Elantras due to a bolo? Yep, sure did. But that's not true, right? Nope, that's not true. Well, because you just sat here on the stand and told us that you got it from IgG, right? I mean, for this man to say that, hey, you may know all about the law and all about case law, but this is common sense. A man just stood on the stand and told you that. So how you could write in an order that you denied having a Frank's because in part, you cannot sit here and say, he said, in quotes, that the police did not get to Bryan Kohberger from partially the car from WSU. I couldn't believe when I saw that in writing. I'm like, what are you talking about? Payne, you're the one that's officiating the fucking thing. I only get to know about it because of this. You actually heard this man say this shit. I just can't even. And Ann Taylor's like, to suppress, which I'm not following. I'm sorry. The court says there are motions to suppress that are not Franks related. She says, right. I'm not going there. He says, that's evidence we can put on today, but I thought we were going to do that later today. This is how confused he is. She's like, absolutely, we're doing that later. He says, there are various Franks motions, one of which is to suppress. One of the Franks motions is that there was a Franks violation by not informing the magistrate of the use of IGG. What? Listen to this answer. There are various Franks motions. What? No, we're asking for Franks to be heard because of the probable cause. I mean, what are you talking about? It's because the officers lied in these search warrants, these PCAs. So he's over here saying, well, there are various Franks motions, one of which is to suppress. One of the Franks motions is that there's a ton of, the way that Ann Taylor did it all is that she was suppressing each one individually, okay, but that they all stem to show that they all flowed from the same thing, which is, like she just said, it all flows from one main thing. If it's like a tree, why? I'm not going to break all these branches off and take 5 days to cut down a tree when I'm just going to chop it from the bottom of the root and knock it all over. But then she said, even if you don't give me the root that I just knocked over, I still have all of these things off of it, but I think I can knock this all out. And in fact, I know that I can't. And this motherfucker just testified that he didn't have shit. And then in your order, it's opposite of his testimony. So Hibbler just says, there are various Franks motions, one of which is to suppress. One of the Franks motions is that there was a Franks violation by not informing the magistrate of the use of IGG in violations. That's not what it was about. You don't have to inform the magistrate that you used IGG, okay? You just can't lie to the magistrate about how you got to a suspect. The fuck are you talking about? You know how many times in probable causes that you don't put everything that you have in there? You understand? You're allowed to not put everything that you have in there. But you cannot lie to the magistrate about how you got to somebody. A Franks is about lying. As you allege them in obtaining the IGG, that's the issue we are doing today in terms of evidence. And I want to stick to that. So getting into the car, which is separate, which I understand your argument is the IGG led them to expand the search of the cars. But that's not the Franks issue itself. The Franks issue itself on IGG is the IGG itself, and it's limited to that. What in the fuck are you talking about? Taylor just says, all right, like, because I think, I'm sorry, but if I was listening to a judge say this to me, she just says, she's like, what are you talking about? He just totally gaslit Taylor. The court says, I'm going to sustain the objection. Ms. Taylor says, okay, all the things in the warrant that became particular to Bryan Kohberger were not on your radar before you learned his identity through IGG. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. And you elected not to put the IGG identification in your probable cause affidavit. Is that right? Yes, ma'am. What led to that decision? Answer. That decision was a collaborative decision. We made that decision in an effort to independently verify the information that was provided to us as a tip from the FBI in much the same way we would any other tip in law enforcement. Let me tell you something. Are you in fucking sane for that? Wait, you're allowed to go ahead and independently verify whatever the fuck you want. Go do it. Once you would independently verify it, like you supposedly did, right? What does that have to do with not putting it in the probable cause affidavit? What does you got it? You didn't arrest him on December 19th, did you? No. Okay. Why didn't you arrest him on December 19th? Because you were independently verifying the tip. Isn't that correct? Yeah. What did you do to independently verify this tip? Well, we needed to compare the DNA. We needed to get his DNA to see if it was. Well, did you attempt to do that? Yeah, we did. Okay. So, and it was like, what? Oh, God, yeah, we got all this trash and we tested it and we finally found that one piece. I mean, I don't know how they do it, but they just told me it was the dad of the dude. What? Okay. So you independently verified it. So why didn't you then, when you wrote up your affidavit to turn it in to arrest him on December 30th, why wouldn't IGG be mentioning that? Because that's how you got to him, right? So trying to tell a magistrate that you got to the suspect any other way would be a lie, right? And you tried to tell the magistrate that you got to him through a WSU query. Is that so? That's all you would ask this piece of shit? And I say piece of shit because you're lying, you're gaslighting. And maybe actually Payne's not doing the gaslighting because he's literally, I think, answering the questions. I think if Ann would have just come out and said, here, Hippler, here, listen to this one. Hey, Payne, were you instructed by the prosecution to make it seem like you got to Bryan Kohber another way than IGG? So it was your decision to mislead the magistrate then by making it seem like you got to him some other type of way. What part of your probable cause affidavit would you deem for your magistrate that you presented this to? How would she believe that this person ever came across your radar? Well, that we were looking for white Elantra. Okay. And did you come across his before you wrote that up? Not that I know about now. Okay. You didn't know until after, right? Well, This is crazy. After I would independently verify the information that was provided to us as a tip from the FBI, in much the same way we would do any other tip in law enforcement. So it was not in any way okay. For example, this happened in Dan Moore's case. There was they called her like it wasn't like a CI, it was what they call it, an S, whatever they labeled it. And they wouldn't, but they put it in the probable cause that there was this witness that gave up information, blah, 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 and that they were not going to reveal the name but they obviously would eventually. And so that was part of the probable cause against Dan Moore. So what he's saying goes out the window for me. You can independently verify something and then you would still use it. Otherwise, you're lying. So it was not in any way meant to obfuscate any sort of information. It was simply, we can validate Mr. Kohlberger's involvement in this incident, or can we not? That was it. Are you absolutely kidding me right now? As a group effort, you decided to intentionally leave that point out of your affidavit. Yes, ma'am. Do you understand how Ann Taylor looks at it? Like, she is getting this man to every which way possible tell this magistrate that you lied by any magistrate thinking that you got to Bryan Kohlberger via any other way than IGG would be a lie. And then we're going to close it out here with, Taylor says, given the limitations at this point, I think that's all my questions. Ashley Jennings says, I have one question. Let's go back to December 19th, December 20th. In the information that was provided to you, or the team, correct? It was a team, right? Yes. And who all was part of that team that received that information? From it was by telephone from the FBI. Gary. So there were several of us. Yourself, Mr. Thompson. Oh my God. Darren Gilbertson from the Idaho State Police. Ed Jacobson from the FBI. I believe there were a couple other folks from the FBI and ISP in the room. I don't remember exactly who they were. And then myself. There was numerous people that were involved. Would it have been essentially the team leaders for the investigation? Yes. Was this any different than the other information and sharing that occurred during this case? No, not at all. That's a lie. There were routine team discussions. Yes, ma'am. We had 2 official briefings every day of the investigation, morning and evening. So twice a day, we would all link up. Oh, is that right? Twice a day, huh? Twice a day, and Blaker never shared this information with you? He never shared this information with you on 11/25 that Bryan Kohlberger, there you go, CFB 8708, white, 11/25, Pullman, not WSU. And that was just a command team. That was everyone who was actively on or an interview would come back to the police department. So everybody would be sitting there in the same room, and every day, twice a day. This is the information that learned. So whatever we learned, that was learned from that day. Whatever was learned from that day. So it was very common throughout this investigation for us to all be in the same room and discussing the same information. So you were not the only investigator receiving information from various sources. Absolutely not. So when we talk about this Exhibit A, that wasn't necessarily just your Exhibit A. No, ma'am, it was not. It was all the information that the investigators had up to that point. Yes, ma'am, that is an accurate statement. Now, related to the IGG and the information you were provided by the FBI, in the information provided, did you receive any medical information about Bryan Kohlberger? No, ma'am, we did not. I don't have any further. Thank you. Medical information, Ashley. First of all, I think you need to work on how many questions that was. That was more than one. And Taylor says, oh, I got something for you. Oh, Miss Jennings said. Miss Jennings just mentioned, Miss Jennings was just talking to you about the team. I guess that got together a couple times a day from November 13th until December 19th or 20th. Is that the target time? Yes, ma'am. Who from the FBI was part of those daily meetings? Oh, like I said, Special Agent Jacobson was there. Maria, I believe Special Agent Rob Hill was involved. Oh boy, I'm trying to think of other names. I don't remember any. There were others. I just don't remember who they were. I apologize. That's okay. How about who else from Moscow Police Department was there? So Captain Blaker was there. Captain Blaker was there. Oh my God, no way. Let's see what Captain Blaker was doing. Oh, okay. Captain Blaker's report, written a damn 6-7 months later. From November 25th through to December 12th, I gathered information from other police agencies around Moscow in reference to any 2012 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra. Remember, this is a report that's just written, and he puts it like that he was only 2013 to 2000 or 12 to 13. Really? Because it was 11 to 2013. Okay, now you're just writing 2012. Like, you can't even lie, right? Okay. Oh, okay. So Blaker was there. Who else was there? I believe usually Detective Vargas was there. You know, sometimes Chief Fry would sit in on those meetings. Most nights Chief Fry would sit in on those meetings. Captain Dollinger, Anthony Dollinger was in those meetings. I bet he was from MPD. I'm trying to think of all the others. Basically, the whole command team from Moscow Police Department itself would have been in those meetings. And then whoever else was, you know, available from the investigations section would also come in. Who from Idaho State Police was there? Well, Darren Gilbertson was there. I believe Detective Joe Lake was there. I can't remember who else was consistently there. I remember, you know, those two for sure. Oh, Lieutenant Mike Mooney was in those meetings. That was the three of the top of my head. Okay. When was the first time you talked about the identification of Bryan Colbert in those meetings? Oh, as far as when we knew of him? Yeah. December 19th. How many hours of meetings do you think you'd had up until the identification of Bryan Colbert? Oh, goodness, many. I don't even know. It was just a lot. Twice a day, every day, right? Yeah, sometimes 7 days a week. Yeah, oh, yeah. Thank you. That's it. Look at us. Look at us now. Yeah, so this just never came up. Okay. Now, close it out with, if you pull up and you go to on 2/18/2025, you know, order. Okay. Okay. I'm going to share this for you guys. And here you go. This is Judge Hippler's order. And okay. Defendant has not met his Frank's burden on issue 4, vehicle identification. In issue 4, the defendant takes issue with Exhibit A insofar as it describes a suspect vehicle captured through various surveillance cameras. Defendants claim that the FBI vehicle specialist felt more comfortable setting the year range of 2011-2013, and law enforcement knew their specialist was of the opinion that the car was also certainly between 2011 and 2013, is based on an email chain between the specialist, Agent Anthony Immel, and another FBI agent, that's Jacobson. However, the email chain, he says, does not support this argument. Are you fucking kidding me? Absolutely it does. What the email chain shows is that on November 26th, now, why this matters is because, like Ann Taylor showed and wanted to show and go into, is that, remember, November 25th, you knew that Bryan Kohberger had a 2015. So those emails, what the email shows is that on November 26th, Agent Immel directed the FBI to open up their search to 2011-2016. In doing so, he discussed the changes to the Hyundai Elantra in 2014 and 2017 and stated that he wanted a quote-unquote better shot of the vehicle's front fog lights and rear reflectors. He further added, rather not leave anything out, better safe than sorry. 5 minutes later, he sent another email stating, yeah, I see the change in 2014 and I'm not really a fan of the 2014, much prefer the 2011-2013, but wanted to lay that out. Have a good night. So that's how Hippler saw it, which is really important because it's like, yeah, that's exactly what the defense just said, is that, yeah, no, remember they were all co-located, and did somebody verbalize that to him and then he writes this out, or did someone send a different email? This is why she wanted all these emails. According to Hippler, these emails demonstrate that it was Agent Immel's decision to open the date range to 2011-2016. Who cares? It was on despite his preference for 2011-2013. Exhibit A accurately captures this decision by stating that the specialist initially believed it was a 2011-2013, but opened it up to 2011-2016 upon further review. While Exhibit A did not call out that Agent Immel preferred narrow time frame, the years, defendant has not shown this omission to be exculpatory and material. Exhibit A is replete with evidence linking defendant's vehicle and cell phone to suspect vehicle 1. Considered as a whole, it cannot be reasonably concluded that Agent Immel's preference for a narrow date range would have derailed the magistrate's finding of probable cause had it been included. And you're like, that's not what we're talking about. Defendant has not demonstrated a false representation or omission with regard to identification of suspect vehicle. Defendant next challenges Exhibit A on grounds that the FBI vehicle specialist identification of suspect vehicle 1 as a 2011-2016 Hyundai Elantra was based on video footage from Ridge Road that law enforcement knew or should have known was not suspect vehicle 1. Defendant states that he, quote unquote, knows law enforcement based its identification off the vehicle on the Ridge Road footage because we have the emails from the FBI specialist who explained on November 23rd, 2022, that their team is mainly looking at the window configuration, something these other images do not. But later that day, an FBI agent sends them images from this video, calling it a great one. However, defendant's proffer does not show the FBI specialist identification was, in fact, made on the Ridge Road footage. It absolutely did. It absolutely did from the reports. What are you talking about? And then they admitted that that's where it came from. The FBI emails defendant contends support his position contain no mention of Ridge Road footage and no mention that the FBI was mainly looking at the window configuration. What are you smoking? Got a great one, attached images from the Ridge Road footage, but there is nothing in the proffer establishing that the images were in fact attached, and importantly, what those images were. Are you kidding me? Holy shit. Well, that's because the defense couldn't get their hands on. We're getting clips and stuff like that. Continuing on. Defendant asserts that the email stating okay, sorry, I read that. At the pre-Franks hearing, the court inquired further into defendant's support for his position that the identification of suspect vehicle 1 was based on the Ridge Road footage. Counsel again referred to the FBI emails and unlabeled screenshots reproduced on page 17 of defendant's amended memo. Are you kidding me? What do you mean unlabeled screenshots? Those are from the emails. Do you understand that based off of what he's saying, you wanted me to call in every single person versus we're supposed to take officers at their word with the discovery? Like, this is what they gave us. This is what this means. Like, what do you mean? This was the discovery request. This is what they sent us in return for the discovery request. This is what we got. This is insufficient to establish beyond speculation that the Ridge Road footage was the basis for the identification. You know what's great is that they came out in the next proceeding and said that it was. And it's in the report. Ridiculous. It wasn't speculation. It was in the reports. What are you talking about? Even assuming if it were, however, defendant has still failed to carry his burden under Franks because the vehicle identification came from the FBI, which was disclosed to the magistrate in the Exhibit A's. There is a presumption of reliability. Excuse me? Thus, at a minimum, defendant must establish that the search warrant, whoever was the offendant, knew that they knew the FBI specialist identification was based on incorrect footage, yet intentionally or recklessly relied on it anyway to obtain search warrants. There is no evidence to this end. Are you kidding? What did Payne say? There is no evidence to this end. Assuming the Ridge Road footage was in fact not of suspect vehicle 1, the affiants were not part of the FBI email chain, which allegedly evidences the use of the Ridge Road footage to make the identification. What are you talking about? Is this? Did you? I said it back then. I said, why wasn't Blaker called? Blaker, what are you talking about? Here it is. Blaker. So you're going to try to sit here and say, because the Moscow Police Department, they were all co-located. They all were going over this because they didn't write up reports saying that they had this material, but they really did have this material? This is never going away. This case is not going away. This is really frustrating, actually, to read. This is sick. Again, does not mean that I'm saying that he's innocent. I'm saying that this is not. Dude, this is wild. So basically, remember what I told you guys? Hippler basically gave Bryan Kohberger a walking pass at ineffective assistance of counsel because of all of his orders. Basically, make Ann Taylor look like she is an absolute, complete, incompetent fool. Because all of this existed, you just didn't call the right people to the stand. There is no evidence to this end, assuming the Ridge Road footage was in fact not of suspect vehicle 1. They just didn't know about it. Further, there is no evidence law enforcement provided the Ridge Road footage to the FBI for identification purposes, knowing it was not suspect vehicle 1. What? Defendant has not met his Franks burden on issue 5, misleading the timeline. Now, this is where I literally threw up. I threw up. Like, this is bad. So if you want to see some bad shit, this will make you mad. This is bad. In issue 5, defendant claims that law enforcement created a false narrative of their investigative timeline in Exhibit A, so as to make it appear that the defendant was identified through their investigative efforts and not, in fact, through IGG. That's exactly what that probable cause affidavit did. In other words, he argues that law enforcement, having already identified defendant through IGG, tailored their Exhibit A to support probable cause for an already identified suspect, not an unknown suspect. Defendant provides 2 examples of what he contends are misleading timelines about his identification, but these examples fall far short. Far short. What? Yeah. Okay. First, defendant notes that in Payne's Exhibit A, Detective Payne states that on November 29th, 2022, officers from Washington State University queried white Elantras registered at the school and pulled up a 2015 white Elantra with Pennsylvania plates that was registered to defendant. That same day, Detective Payne states another WSU officer was patrolling the area by defendant's apartment and located 2015 white Elantra with Washington plates. He ran the plate and it returned to defendant. Defendant points out that Detective Payne was not even aware of the WSU officers finding this in regard until after. Okay. What do you mean? What do you mean the defendant points out? Officer Payne testified to that after defendant was already identified by IGG. That's his testimony. We just read it. However, he contends Payne's Exhibit A makes it appear that defendant was identified in, what do you mean in part? There was no in part. He was wholly in part my ass through the WSU through the WSU queries. Second, defendant takes issue with Detective Payne's focus on Suspect Vehicle 1's lack of front license plate. In Payne's Exhibit A, he discusses his review of surveillance footage, noting a review of camera footage indicated that a white sedan hereafter Suspect Vehicle 1 was observed traveling westbound on Steiner Avenue at Idaho State Highway 95 in Moscow at approximately 3:28. On this video, it appeared Suspect Vehicle 1 was not displaying a front license plate. Well, what do you mean takes issue with? Payne testified that had to have come afterwards. That means that they weren't looking at that. Detective Payne later points out the defendant registered his 2015 white Honda Elantra with Washington State on November 18th, 2022. He noted that previously the vehicle was registered in Pennsylvania, which, unlike Idaho and Washington, does not require a front license plate to be displayed. Defendant contends that although Exhibit A makes it appear that law enforcement was focused on the lack of a front license plate early on, it was not until after he was identified through IGG that it became an object of inquiry. In neither example has the defendant established Detective Payne's investigation timeline to be misleading, false, much less intentionally or recklessly so. Are you serious? Are you kidding me? He just testified. He just testified and said, What? You're shitting me. In neither example has defendant established a Detective Payne's investigation timeline to be misleading or false, much less intentionally or recklessly so. There can be no question. Oh my God, there can be no question that the defendant was identified in part through WSU's officers' queries. Oh my God, what? What? and through the suspect vehicle's lack of a front license plate. What? As observed in surveillance videos from the night of the murders. What are you talking about? There can be no question that defendant was identified in part through the WSU officers' queries and through the suspect vehicle's lack of a front license plate, as observed in surveillance footages from the night of the murders. What are you talking about? Oh my God, this is insanity. This is flat out insane. What the fuck? The fact that law enforcement had additional, just the fact that law enforcement had additional DNA evidence, that's all they that's all they had. What are you talking about? Additional. What is he? The fact that law enforcement had additional DNA evidence tying defendant to the crime does not render it improper for law enforcement to rely on independent evidence accomplishing the same. That's where you're wrong. It's not accomplishing the same. If the PCA 150%, anybody that reads it, it was like we all, America, outside of the country, everybody, not a single person was like, oh, just wait for it. You know, they used investigative genealogy, and that's how they really identified him, making this all lies. The question I kept asking was how did they get to Bryan Kohberger? How did you get to Bryan Kohberger? How did you get to him? And I'm still asking that. The $1 million question. This is a fucking lie. This is a lie. And then here's Hitler, though. Well, it would arguably be irresponsible for the law enforcement to rely solely on DNA evidence without making an effort to corroborate. That's not what they did. It wasn't like they just put in that and was like, okay, whatever, here we go. They didn't try to obtain a search warrant with just DNA. And then this is where it gets really, really crazy then too, is that, okay, Hitler, well, then we were about to show you that Nick Balance knew that there was all these other data points, but had to act like the phone shut off at 2:47 when really it didn't. Because that's reverse engineering as well. So Hitler, you're saying that they had all this evidence because they have the phone and the car moving together. They didn't. That car that they have, that's not where the phone's at. This is just sick. I don't understand how when somebody takes a stand like Officer Payne did, and he's telling you that we only got to Bryan because of IGG, I don't know how you can write this up after somebody testifies to that. Yeah, no, we did not know him at all. So the question for me isn't that in a probable cause affidavit, you don't have to put everything that you have. No shit, Sherlock. No shit. But what you cannot do in a probable cause affidavit as a warrant and under the penalty of perjury is you cannot lie about how you built. You cannot lie about how you got to a suspect. You cannot mislead. And so this is just gaslighting right here. Here would be arguably irresponsible for law enforcement to rely solely on DNA evidence without making an effort to corroborate it. Yeah, you would make the effort before you went ahead and wrote it up? And then once you corroborated it, why wouldn't it be part of your affidavit? It doesn't matter, particularly given the novelty of IgG. That does not matter. Defendant has not established that there is anything wrong with this approach. And then he cites United States versus Taylor. I'm printing that off. I want to read that. Anyways, that's where we're going to end today. I mean, this is just, there you go. I mean, it's observing that requirement under Franks that search warrant affidavits be truthful and complete does not require that every fact recited therein be correct or that every detail of an investigation be provided. They weren't asking for every detail to be provided. And this is the wrong case. Like, this is not what you would rely upon. They're simply saying that the information that was put in there, by excluding it, you're lying. Because without it, you cannot state anything else that you have. That's not how you develop probable cause. You did not develop probable cause because of those things. In fact, then you had to go as far as to lie about the things that you then had to rely upon. And that's what Cyree was about to pop them all with. And so anybody out there that wants to know why there was a plea deal, this is why. Have a great rest of your afternoon. I'll be back later tonight for all my night owls. 9:30, the PCA lie continues. But Ann Taylor, I think she was stunned. I think she was stunned because she's like, when have I ever gotten a detective on the stand to admit to what she got him to admit to, and just was literally slapped in the face with a bag of dicks. That's what happened. And anybody in Ann Taylor's position right here, seeing this order would have been like, what? So I personally believe that if Bryan wanted to appeal this and he wanted to go the route of ineffective assistance of counsel, Hippler basically gave him a walking path just to use all of Hippler's orders, because based on Hippler's orders, the material was all there. Ann Taylor just didn't present it good. Ann Taylor just didn't present it right, which would be ineffective assistance of counsel. So that's all. That's all. It's all right there. But his orders basically say that Ann Taylor was ineffective. Peace out, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts. Everybody get a scout. Get some cookies. Thanks so much to all the mods, super stickers, chatters. Let's see, the truth and transparency that's needed on the case. Oh, thank you so much, April. Appreciate that. Cheers. Amy, welcome, membership land. Melissa, where you been, girl? YouTube is pissing me off, Lana. So I'm using the last money for you. Oh, thank you. Don't get pissed. I'd rather be pissed off than pissed on, you know? Lana, unknown male B infuriates every fiber of my being. How the hell can they get away with this? Why isn't anyone questioning this stuff? Well, I think now that we have the MPD reports, I just think that it's just, what's the way I want to say it? It infuriates me for cases like Sheldon Jeter Jr., who, by the way, I'm going to put out his entire discovery that I have, because I said, you know what, I've built up an army now. I think that my army could help me advocate for him to make sure that his case is known and that he gets the support that he needs for this retrial. But I basically did and uncovered everything for him and his family for his case, and it's his evidentiary hearing is coming up September 30th. So it's infuriating. All of it is. I got some cool people on to help Sheldon though. Lana, you have more patience than God allowed anyone to have. Keep on bringing. Again, you guys, Bryan Kohberger could be the guiltiest motherfucker out there. I'm simply saying that it's really hard for me when I see this to trust like this isn't how it's supposed to be. And I don't care what side you're. It's about our rights. I don't care if you're a prosecutor. I don't care if you're a public defender, a private lawyer. You see this stuff. Any lawyer, any judge, like that's why I wanted what's her name on here, Judge Liz. Like Judge Liz, how could you listen to that testimony and then see this order? I mean, how? Like, so maybe she'll take me up on my offer. I want her to like see my presentation and then just, hey, how would you have handled this? Would you be doing and writing the same things? Or how about this? You're now a lawyer. If this was your case, how would you have presented these motions? How would you have argued them? Who would you have called to the stand? Things like that. Like that's how we learn, you know. Interviewing somebody and asking them to like 6 or 7 questions clipped and it's just the same stupid shit. Who learns from that? Like, God, no. I hate that type of stuff. I don't need to hear what you had for breakfast. I don't give a fuck. Proud member. Hi, Deb. 27 months. Shit, girl. That's 3 babies. Bluebird. Best stock reader ever. Hey. And I blame my stuttering on the way they spell their words and the way that they punctuate. And it's not me. You tied this all together with one tight ass knot, Lana. I think I did, didn't I? Now you just wonder, why would Bryan Kohberger ever take a deal, even if he was the killer? It's mind blowing. Like being the killer, killers don't usually take. They're like, fuck that. Look at all the shit I have going for me. You know, why would you ever take this? Why would you ever take a deal? And the ass whipping. Oh, that was about to come with the timing advance. It's a girl. Kelly, thank you so much. Sarah, thank you so much. Appreciate you guys. All right, go rock yourselves. Twiz, what is up, brother? I saw Truth Censored. Beth Lana's finishing up, but coming back in tonight in case you got here after she mentioned late night show. Yes, I think it's 9:30. Gotta go rest my voice. Okay, peace out. Thank you.